At what point has a bug existed for so long in a codebase, being coded around by so many projects, it's no longer really a bug. Instead, it's, albeit a really stupid one, it's a feature of the codebase. Well, this is a problem the Cosmic Desktop has had to deal with, as discovered by Michael Murphy, who may know better as mmstick. The Cosmic Desktop has always had a bit of a memory issue, and a lot of people like to just blame Rust for that. Oh, Rust code uses more memory. No, that's not the case. I don't know where this idea came from. It doesn't have to be like that. Out of the box, the Cosmic Desktop has used quite a bit more memory than you would expect. It has gotten much better over time. It's still not great, but a lot of optimization work has already been done. It's also had quite a few memory leaks. Not necessarily true memory leaks, but it's still been a problem. And again, over time, Cosmic has been progressively getting better. But a lot of this issue isn't actually a problem in Cosmic itself. It's something Cosmic has to fix, but it's not because of Cosmic. And it's not because of Smithy. And it's not even a problem in Rust itself. It's a problem going all the way down to GLIBC Malloc. This is a problem that could occur in basically any codebase you run on your Linux system. And it's a problem that other Linux projects that you know about, that you probably have used, have dealt with in the past and have already patched. Here is a patch from 2012 in Kwin. Here is a patch from 2009 in Nautilus. And here is a patch from 2005 in GIMP, all dealing with the exact same problem. This is weird behavior, a bug, depends on how you want to define it, that exists in GLIBC and has been there for at least 2 decades, probably longer. And here is the report on Cosmic. Fix set mmap threshold to prevent memory fragmentation. I read some articles about how default behavior in GLIBC Malloc causes some applications to consume large amounts of RAM until reaching that being out of memory. There's a tunable parameter called mmap threshold, or Malloc mmap threshold environment variable, which defines when an allocation will use mmap instead of sbrk. Both sbrk and mmap are ways to claim memory from the operating system, allocating memory. sbrk is used as the primary method, switching to mmap later on for larger amounts of memory. With sbrk, basically it expands the program break. This is the region of memory that the application has access to. So basically, it takes that space and then makes the space bigger. Mmap allows for random independent chunks to be allocated. You can specify where you want them to be, and it will try to fulfill that goal, basically allowing you to take memory from anywhere it lets you get access to. If you're curious about some of the basics of Malloc and more explanation on how sbrk and mmap work, this is a really, really good video. Go and watch it. It's 7 minutes long. It's absolutely worth your time. Small sbrk buffers are stored by Malloc in arenas for reuse by the application. mmap buffers are released by the OS instantly on drop. The problem is that the default behavior of Malloc is to dynamically increase the threshold if this tunable is not set, which leads to some applications storing lots of randomly sized gigantic buffers in its arenas, which may never be freed. This lowered memory usage of Cosmic BG on my system from 96 megabytes to 25. But that's one of the smaller cases. Some libcosmic apps were affected, causing as much as 10 to 30x memory usage. 10 to 30x. Let me just put that into perspective. Let's say you have an application which, under ideal conditions, uses, I don't know, 100 megabytes of memory. 10 to 30x is 1 gigabyte to 3 gigabytes. Obviously, if you have the memory, not that big of a deal. But when we're talking about a desktop environment, that very, very quickly spirals out of control. Here we have two known affected apps which have already been patched. XDG Desktop Portal Cosmic, freeing up 200 megabytes on my system, and then Cosmic files going from 300 plus megabytes to 40 after navigating through a couple of directories with images. That is a massive improvement. This is a problem that I've run into with Cosmic files, and honestly, just a lot of the Cosmic applications, for what they do, for how simple a lot of them are, they were very, very, very heavy. And this isn't the only cause of them being heavy. But at least for the RAM usage, this is going to be a massive improvement in that regard. Because look, right now, I'm running KDE. I have OBS open, I have Firefox open with a bunch of different tabs. I'm using 5 gigabytes of RAM on my system. On Cosmic, this is what I would have been using with nothing open. Just opening the desktop, it would be around about that. Maybe like 4.5. And again, if you're not using the RAM, it's not a big deal if something is using it, right? Like, if you have 32 gigabytes of RAM and then something is using 8 instead of 4, you still have all of that free RAM. But it is nice to have the additional resources not just being wasted on things, so if you do want to use them, they can be allocated to things where they actually will have value. You know, video games, or virtual machines, or rendering, or other things where they actually are intensive. Whilst this might be a newly known issue to the Cosmic developers, as we saw from the fact that other projects patched this a very, very long time ago, this is not a newly known issue when working with GLIBC Malloc. Thank you to Michael Murphy for sending these to me. There are quite a few related bug reports. Free doesn't honor mtrim threshold. This was reported on 2012. A common Malloc pattern can make memory not given back to the OS. Reported in 2020. Malloc trim is not working correctly for arenas other than Arena 0, reported in 2023, and Malloc/free can't give the memory back to the kernel when the main arena is discontinuous, reported in 2013. Along with quite a few blog posts on this matter, here is one from Cloudflare, the effect of switching to TC Malloc on RocksDB memory use. Now, the second half of this is about the specific Malloc they go to fix the problem, but the first half is actually why the problem exists. Let's begin with a high-level view of GLIBC's Malloc design. Malloc uses a concept called an arena. An arena is a contiguous block of memory, so memory that's in a sequence, memory that's together, obtained from the system. An important part of GLIBC Malloc is that it expects developers to free memory in a reverse order of allocation. Otherwise, a lot of memory will be locked and never returned to the system. Let's see what it means in practice. Now, ideally, this is how it should look. You free this memory, you free this memory, and now we have this. However, if you're not keeping Malloc's design in mind, this can start to happen, where you have a lot of fragmentation. Now, ideally, this is how it should go. You allocate all of this memory, and then free the 100 kilobytes, free the 40 kilobytes, and have this remaining. However, if you don't keep that in mind, let's go further with our simple example. If our application allocates/frees memory without keeping Malloc's design in mind, after a while, we will see the following picture. Okay, so the problem is clear. Memory fragmentation. There's a bunch of memory here that is not being freed up that other services can't go and use. But why did it lead to such high memory usage? Because it's one thing to just have the memory there allocated to the application, but why is it going and using more and more memory? To understand that, let's take a step back and consider how Malloc works for highly concurrent, multi-threaded applications. There are so many problems caused by multi-threaded applications and things just not being designed in such a way that they make sense. To allocate a chunk of memory from an arena, a thread should acquire an exclusive lock for that arena. So basically, it's the only thing that can access that arena. When an application has multiple threads, this will create a lock contention, so things trying to fight over a lock, and poor performance for multi-threaded services. To handle this situation, Malloc creates several arenas using the following logic. a thread tries to get a chunk of memory from an arena it used last time. In order to do that, it acquires an exclusive lock for that arena. If the lock is held by another thread, it tries the next arena. If all arenas were locked, it creates a new arena and uses memory from it. There is a limit on the number of arenas, 8 arenas per core. And this is the place where the fragmentation problem magnifies and leads to huge memory waste. All arenas are independent of each other, and memory can never move from one arena to another. Why is that bad? Let's take a look at the following example. Because thread 1 has previously used arena 1, it's going to try and request memory from arena 1. But arena 1 doesn't actually have a block that's suitable here. Arena 2 does. This would make a lot more sense to grab the memory from. So instead what happens is, because it can't use the available memory here, because it can't grab 10 kilobytes here and then fill it up from here, it wants to grab a contiguous block, it's going to have to request more memory from this area and make the arena even bigger. Ideally in this scenario, we would prefer to get this block of memory from arena 2 since it has a chunk of that size available. However, due to the design, this won't happen. The main point here is having multiple independent arenas improves the performance of multi-threaded applications by reducing lock contention, but the trade-off is it increases memory fragmentation, since each memory request chooses the best fit fragment from an individual arena and not the best fit fragment overall. Earlier he wrote that memory lock between used chunks can never be returned to the system. Actually, there is a way to do that, otherwise the memory would just never be freed. Malloc trim is a function provided by GLIBC Malloc, and it does exactly that. It goes through all the unused chunks and returns them to the system. The problem is that you need to explicitly call this function from your application. You might say, oh, wait, I remember that this function is sometimes called when you call the free function. I saw it in the man page. Well, turns out for 15 years, the man page had a documentation error, and free never actually calls the function. Like, at all. So, if you were using it with the expectation that that was going to be called, it just never happened. Now, whilst using GLIBC Malloc, there are a couple of solutions, and the third one is the one that Cosmic is doing. mmap threshold. All allocations higher than this parameter would use the mmap syscall and would not take memory from the arena directly. That means that memory allocated with this approach would never be locked between chunks of memory and can always be returned to the system. It solves the fragmentation problem for large chunks, so only small chunks would be locked. The trade-off here is that each such allocation would execute an expensive syscall, and there is a system limit that caps the maximum number of chunks allocated with mmap. The other solution is don't use GLIBC Malloc. Like here, they swap to TC Malloc, and there are other solutions like gmalloc as well that handle things much better. Now, speaking of gmalloc, they could make use of that in Cosmic, but this is what Michael Murphy has to say. Not sure we want to require distributions to depend on one or the other. They would most certainly prefer dynamic linking to static linking. As far as I can tell, the only viable option is this right here, system-me malloc, which makes binaries a bit less portable if we require it. Which is completely understandable. They're not trying to just make Cosmic for Pop! OS. It's supposed to be something that any distro can go and use, that users can go and customize to fit their needs. So tying it down more than it really needs to be just doesn't really fit with what they're doing. It makes much more sense to try and make Malloc just behave a little bit better. Now you might say, oh, Cosmic bad, how could they have this problem? Oh, wow, Cosmic sucks so much. But problems like this aren't the kind of thing you look at when you're first developing a system. Optimization usually comes sometime down the line, and Cosmic is getting to the point where the beta is coming. I don't know. Carl said March, February. We'll see. I expect full release probably sometime around like July, Augusty. But as we're getting closer to this, these issues that aren't of critical importance, getting the desktop like featureful, that's the very first thing. Now that we're dealing with this stuff, things are really progressing, and I generally like the Cosmic desktop, and I think for the most part, it's going in a good direction. But let me know your thoughts. down below. Have you noticed Cosmic using just more memory than you really think it should be? Did you care? Did you not care? Did you know about this problem and think, oh, this is something that Cosmic probably should have to deal with at some point? I'd love to know. So if you liked the video, go and like the video. And if you really like the video and you want to become one of these amazing people over here, check out the Patreons, GLIBC Malloc, linked in the description down below. That's going to be it for me, and Rust.